And Israel defended itself against allegations its war against Hamas amounts to genocide against the Palestinians at the United Nations top court today. Israel presented its opening argument at the International Court of Justice in The Hague. South Africa brought the case, claiming that the war is part of systemic oppression and violence against Palestinians. Israel strongly rejects that claim. It says that Hamas is the one guilty of genocide and the world is being weaponized.
Attempt to weaponize the term genocide against Israel in the present context does more than tell the court a grossly distorted story. And it does more than empty the word of its unique force and special meaning. It subverts the object and purpose of the convention itself.
And South Africa's justice minister says that Israel failed to justify the war in its arguments before the court today.
Some of the points made are astonishing and are not backed by facts and the situation on the ground. Israel suggests that the Genocide Convention is primary for their protection and because of that is not capable of violating its own provisions. The state of Israel today has failed to disprove South Africa's compelling case that was presented before the court yesterday.
And for more, we're joined live by Michael Lynk, an associate law professor at Western University and former UN Special Rapporteur for Human Rights in the occupied Palestinian territory. Michael, thank you very much for joining us this morning. First off, can you succinctly define what genocide is and the evidence that South Africa is showing to support these allegations?
Sure. Genocide is defined by the 1948 Genocide Convention, which both Israel and South Africa are signatories to. It basically is the intention to try to destroy a people, an ethnic, religious group in whole or in part by means of either killing them or creating great harm to them, or otherwise denying them the conditions of life that would lead to their physical destruction. That's the technical term here. And we, of course, have seen genocides in the latter part of the 20th century, Rwanda, going back to the Holocaust and the Second World War. More recently, were allegations of genocide being committed by Myanmar in its treatment of the Rohingya people. And that is also an issue that's before the International Court of Justice today.
And along those lines, what evidence is South Africa using to allege, or rather to support these allegations?
Sure. By looking at its application that it submitted to the court 2 weeks ago and from the arguments that it made yesterday in front of the International Court of Justice, it's pointing to two aspects. One are the acts. It's pointing to the killings, to the physical destruction of housing and buildings of civilian life, such as schools, universities, or mosques, and it's pointing to the pattern of starvation and the denial of humanitarian aid getting into Gaza. And then secondly, it's pointing to intent. And in its application, it listed more than 60 statements made by Israeli political and military leaders over the last 3 months, which indicate a desire to, some of the phrases used that they quoted were, Gaza has to be flattened. There are no innocent civilians in Gaza. Everybody is guilty. We're going to cut off all food, water, fuel to Gaza. Comments along these lines, which they say indicate an intent to commit genocide along with the acts that have actually occurred.
Okay, and let's talk about the timeline of these hearings and also how Israel is defending itself.
Sure. The timeline is this. Think of this as in two parts. The hearings right now are into a request by South Africa for what is called provisional measures, which is equivalent to what we call an injunction in our court system. South Africa is asking the court to issue provisional measures that would bring an immediate halt to Israel's military operations in Gaza and to allow full access for humanitarian aid to be able to get in there. The longer term, the second step, would be a full trial in several years' time as to whether or not there is going to be genocide. All South Africa has to prove at this stage is that there's a plausible case for genocide in order for the court to take these interim measures in order to be able to bring the issue in order to bring it to a halt. So we shall see in a couple of weeks. I think the court will probably deliver its decision on whether or not to issue provisional measures by the end of January or the very beginning of February. So what did Israel say today in its statements? Israel argued that there is no dispute between South Africa and Israel, a technical argument to say that the court doesn't have jurisdiction. But even if the court does have jurisdiction, Israel went on to say, it said, we were the victim of an horrendous attack that killed 1,150 people, primarily civilians, on October 7th. This was genocidal in itself. We were the victims of genocide, Israel is saying, not the perpetrators of genocide. It went on to say that, well, war is brutal. We've done everything we can within international law to try to lessen civilian suffering, lessen civilian deaths and injuries in Gaza. Really, all the fault belongs with Hamas and hiding among the population, fighting from mosques, fighting from schools, fighting from hospitals. We've done everything humanly possible. The argument went today by Israel to say genocide in this case is an overblown term. If what we're doing is genocide, then genocide has lost all meaning and can't be used in international law.
Okay, Associate Law Professor at Western University, Michael Lynk, thank you very much for that explanation.